ask this question, which is fine. I respect all of your opinions immensely in that regard. Posted a great video and then asked a question which I think is perfect. If everything is indeed hipster, then in fact nothing really is, so we can't really just call everything hipster. So I'll go back to that. I think that is the cultural tendency at the moment. I think you've got a very good point, Mr. Andy Creedon. I, however, am not one of those people, because I think hipster is kind of a motivation and is kind of a way of life that is one that I don't share, which is that you just go and identify with retro things, not because that you actually enjoy them or that you have anything to do with them, but instead that you they're just old or they're just crappy and no one likes them, and so you start to like them. That, I think, is probably the kind of classical definition of what a hipster is, and it's also probably what most of you are thinking about when you think about hipster. In any case, I think it's a good point. If everything is hipster, then really nothing is, because what does it really mean anymore? And I thought the video that you had sent from, I think, Cracked, I'm not sure, did a wonderful job of explaining that. Okay. Lastly, a big welcome back to Physics of Video Games. Great to have you back in the conversation. Brings up the idea, you can connect to something, suggests, not necessarily said, suggests that you can connect to something but never truly understand the historical context for something that wasn't around before you were. And you know what, folks? This is obviously a position that was not widely held in the community, but really gets to the heart of why I asked the question. You know, I think it's an argument worth making. I'm not sure I buy it, but I think it's an argument worth making to say that you can connect to something before your time. You might have everything I just said. I have my own associations with Star Wars or New Hope. I have my own things that you know, connections that I make to those things that are unique to me. But the fact of the matter is, I was not alive in '77. I didn't go to the theater and watch it and experience it when it was brand new, when everyone was talking about it. I experienced it much later in a very different historical context. So can I ever, I mean, I know I can tell the story of Star Wars, I know how it came to be, I know the writing mechanisms and all those fun things. What I don't know is, can I ever really know what that context was? Can I ever really describe with any kind of validity what that is? And I think at the end of the day, a good compelling argument can be made that I never will. Even if I understand it per se, I wasn't there, I didn't experience it, and therefore we kind of start to begin to ask ontological questions of, you know, what is your philosophy of being and experience? What is your interpretation of experience? Is it empirical in nature, where you have to experience something, or is it more that you know, we get kind of symbolic representations of things that help us understand things, or even you know, epistemological questions of what it means to really know something, so on and so forth. The point is, folks, we can get really, really deep with a lot of this stuff, but I think it's a valid point, and the valid point is this: you might not be able to truly connect with things that came before you, and then what you do is kind of piecemeal it together to mean something to you. Maybe that is, though, the definition of what Mr. K was talking about. See, I'm just going to tie a nice bow around this perfectly, right? But maybe our desire and ability to connect to those old things, even though we'll never experience them and know them in that context, is why we build those kind of universal connections that make something timeless. Maybe that's just what it's all about. I don't know. Maybe I just totally made a nonsensical point and you're all out there scratching your heads. I don't know. Maybe I just made the greatest point I've ever made in the Weekly Ringer. I have absolutely no idea. The point is, you guys be the judge. I think, though, that, or I'll get into what I think specifically now, which is, I think you can absolutely connect. And I don't think it's necessarily a hipster thing. I think the hipster thing is totally the opposite of appreciating stuff that came before. Now, I've talked to some hipsters that actually land on some good stuff. They land on good stuff, right? And they go, man, have you heard this? And I go, yeah, totally. I mean, that's that's what I grew up listening to, or what have you, right? Something that you've been very much into before. They land on cool things, and you kind of go, okay, cool. Am I a hipster now? No. I mean, but the point is, I think at that point you kind of go, cool. Maybe the motivation wasn't the right one, and maybe this guy's a hipster douche or whatever. But hey, found some cool stuff. Can't disagree with that. Find some good old music. Find some great movies that went out of style or B grade or whatever, and just loving them. And I think that's great. I think it's really cool to connect in that way. I don't think it's just a hipster thing. In fact, it's something I think, or I love, and something I do all the time. Here's another bonus point for you. What you should totally do is go out there and check out a brand new video from our pals over at Vsauce. Michael from Vsauce has done a wonderful video just this week called Why Do We Feel Nostalgia? Great video. Check it out. I'll link to it. So that you guys can get your hands on that as well. I think that'll answer a few questions that some of you might have, or at least be able to kind of, I guess, serve as a backdrop to some of the things I just said about how we forge our identity through some of the things that we experience. It's just as simple as that. Go check out those guys. They're doing tremendous work, and we certainly love to support them whenever we can here on clanofthegraywolf.com. So, without further ado, this leads me to the question for next week. No surprise here, the Xbox One, not the Xbox 720, or Durango, was announced this week. And there were certainly some interesting things that came from those announcements, so on and so forth. And I think, regardless of what we think about it, it's very clear to me that the new generation of consoles are building themselves into a different different kind of mentality than was, I guess, existed before. They're going to do a lot of things. They're not going to look and feel necessarily like video game consoles. They're going to try to look and feel more like entertainment devices. We have talked about that. We have talked about that extensively here on the Weekly Wringer. But you know what else came up last week that I thought was interesting was, the control mechanism that came up with the Xbox, that I thought kind of lent itself to some thoughts. So obviously Microsoft announced their new controller, which looks a lot like the old one. It looks a lot like the PlayStation controller. It looks a lot like the Super Nintendo controller, if you want to take a look at it in terms of the button arrangement and so on and so forth. But so here's the question I want to ask. I think that the Xbox 360 controller is clearly the model for all controller-based games for the future. I know the Wii U even uses the LCD screen there as well between a controller, but I think that's a little bit off the beaten path. You can still buy the traditional controllers for a Wii U to be able to play games of the past or what have you. I think. So what I'm thinking about here, guys, that I'm rambling on about right now, is that, it seems to me that the de facto model of the video game universe has now become the Xbox 360 controller. And so here's the question I'm going to ask you guys. For next week, it's going to look something just like this. Is the Xbox 360 controller the best video game controller of all time? Pretty self-explanatory. Don't even need to fill it in with explanatory statements today. I think you guys can handle that question standing on its own. Okay, so can't wait to hear what you guys say for that question. See those comments for next time. Looking forward to answering that. Looking forward to E3. It's going to be a great show. I think there's going to be a lot of things going on. Got to pay close attention to what kind of announcements are coming out, and very excited to see what kind of things are coming through E3. So, With that, I will leave you with this. If you guys have any suggestions you'd like to make for the Weekly Ringer, or you'd like to tell me that you don't like what I'm doing, or you want to tell me that I'm great and should be crowned the king of all media, which was a great suggestion that I think was posted this week. I don't know how Howard Stern would react to that, but I think he'd probably just laugh. Point is, whatever you think, you can get a hold of me in a couple ways. You can send me a private message through the website, very easy to do that. You can send me an email at commodore128@clanofthegraywolf.com, or you can just follow me on Twitter at It's the Commodore, all one word, and please send any of your suggestions to me in that regard through those particular media. So, with that in mind, folks, I thank you for watching, as I always do, here on the Weekly Ringer. And I hope to hear from all of you for next time. So with that, I am the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and there is no reset button.